How you doing? Kevin Massive here. We're in my studio in London, the United Kingdom. We're basically going to go through two tracks. The first one is a remix I've done for Candy Williams called I Get Lifted, coming out on Milk and Sugar in Germany. The second one is my forthcoming single on my new label, Get Down Recordings, featuring MC Flipside. So what I'm going to do is explain how I work a remix, sort of pretty straightforward, pretty standard for me. Might not be for a lot of other people how I do my things, but it works for me. And the second one is my own track, the 3 stages that I always do when I make a track. And first is working with MIDI, the second one is working with audio, and the third project is basically mixing and mastering it down to create the final project. So, well, that's what we're going to do, so stay tuned. This is a remix I did for Candy Williams, a track called I Get Lifted, coming out on Milk and Sugar Records. That is my remix that I've just done for Candy Williams for the German label Milk and Sugar, this is actually, I've not actually delivered the mastered yet, so I'm going to be doing that later on today or tomorrow and sending it off to Germany. Basically, I was asked to remix this track. It's an original that came out a few years ago, the vocal was anyway, and I was asked to do a remix of it, and I absolutely loved the track, so I was like, yeah, cool. They sent me the remix parts. And all I got was a vocal. That was it, nothing else. So I basically had to recreate a whole backing track from scratch, keep in feeling with the original vocal, keep in feeling with the label as well. They wanted something housey, piano-y, big, uplifting, and and that's what I play in my sets as well. So that's why this remix took this direction it did. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward, four to the floor track. A lot of the stuff that you see here is actually audio. I don't actually finish off my tracks in MIDI. I start with MIDI. So if I scroll down here on the screen, you can basically see all the different sounds. Like for example, this is one that I've chosen to call a deep synth, and it sounds like this. All right. Well, that sounds pretty shit. So basically what I've done is I bounce it down into audio, then I manipulate the sound afterwards. Because when I started making music, I had a really old G4, really old, and it would basically crash if I had way too much MIDI. So I just learned to bounce everything down into audio. But then if I do want to change the sound, then I have all the different elements here. Like, for example, this synth here is, it's just an old standard ARP, and that's a Predator. The one before that was a Nexus 2. But then what I do after that is then I go in, and then I add the reverb on the MIDI file, I add the delays, I add all the automation that I need, then I bounce it down, then I chuck it in as an audio file, and then I re-edit that sound. So sort of like your own remix part. Because I find, this is my own personal opinion anyway, that the more MIDI you have, the more automation that you have on your track, I get confused and I sometimes forget what's what. And if I need to move something around, the automation moves, and it's just a pain in the ass. So this works for me really well. So like I said, everything here is audio. So yeah, it's like doing your own remix. When I start working on a remix, I don't really have a direction to go until I hear the vocals. Then I chuck on the drums in the background, and then the drums basically define which direction the track is going to take. So if it's a prog type beat, then I add prog sounds. If it's more house, like this, then I add piano. It's a logical progression for me when I'm working. I get inspired by what I'm listening to. And it's a very, very housey vocal. So anything other than a house rhythm and a house piano just wouldn't work for this. So. When I received the vocals for this track, I actually received 2 stems. One was affected and one was dry, which was great because then I could actually add my own effects. Because sometimes the overlapping delay on the wet stem, it was too much because I needed that one section and then I had to cut it out, and you know you're cutting half a reverb out and it's just really annoying. So this is actually a mixture of the two. It's a mixture of the wet and the dry.
So guess the meaning is right to make the things alright.
So that was it, nothing else basically. But the good thing about house music is it's all linear. There's no chord changes, there's nothing. And I'm not a musician, I can't play any instruments. This is my magic bass finger. This one plays the piano, the bass, the keys, anything I need. And it works. I should insure this. I should do that. But anyway, so I just basically got a track up. Mostly when I do work on remixes, I just start by laying out a drum section, because then the drums gives you an indication of where the track's going to go. If you put in a jacking drum beat underneath the vocals, then you automatically feel it's got to be something bouncy. If you put something in that's more deep house, then the track for me takes a more deep house direction. And you know, I started off by putting in drums that I thought were quite housey. The piano that I use on this is from the Nexus 2, which I think is a really powerful synth, and it just has the right sound. So this is the Dance Piano 2K7, whatever that means, but it sounds cool. So let me just quickly play it for you here. For me, it has that right, punchy, old school sound to it. Logic has its own built-in pianos, which are also very, very cool, but they lack fatness. They're too tin and thinny, and you know, it just doesn't quite do it for me. I used to layer like 4 or 5 pianos on top of each other when I was working with Logic synths. With the Nexus, I don't need to. They already sound fat. And then actually what I also do is I add an auto filter. I just plug it in, and as you can see, the filter itself is not actually doing anything. But what it does, it just slightly takes the top off the piano sound and makes it a bit less sharp and pointy, and just makes it more round. And you know, it gives it a bit of a low end frequency as well. It boosts the bottom end for some reason. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it works for me, and it does. You know, it's and then I double up the piano with the synth as well. This is more of a different frequency of the piano loop, which then builds up. So you can't really hear it, but it gives movement. And I think that, especially with dance music, because it's so linear, nothing really happens. There aren't really a lot of chord changes in this particular style of dance music. I think it's important that you have a natural movement in your music to create a bit of space, a bit of it's alive, because you can just have one loop that does nothing for 6 minutes. Come on, do something, make it a bit more exciting to listen to. And these are just the small little things that I do. So I always layer up my synths, I always layer up my pianos with another sound that might have a flanger effect. It might be just a filter opening and closing underneath, but playing exactly the same thing. And yeah, I think the end result is really cool. I work. This is the funny part when I do my music. Basically, I use a stereo summing, which is the TubeTech thing down here, which you'll probably see in a minute. And I basically have 4 masters, and for each master, I'll just flip over to the master here. For each master, I have a different setup of internal compressions. I don't compress a lot in Logic unless the track needs it. This didn't need that much compression. For example, if track 1, master 1, which I've just got the Logic's own mastering, it's just refresh and compression soft, which is just a standard Logic setup. I use that actually, that and then the medium, because I think they give a good punch and a good crunch to a track. So if you actually listen to what I've got on this one, you'll hear that there's probably some drums, there's probably a synth sound and maybe a vocal. That's it. Because these are the sounds that, when I started to map out the masters, that I felt needed that extra punch. And then, for example, if I go to master 2, which has no compression on it, then you've got your piano, you've got a snare, and you've got a synth sound as well. And then number 3 should be the vocals and maybe another sound, as far as I remember. Yeah. And then number 4, is the drums. Basically, the reason for doing this is I find that when you mix internally in Logic, your sound, it doesn't quite live up to what it's supposed to. So this is all going basically through the summing, which is then going through the mixer. So in theory, this is just like having a big analog mixer desk that I can work through. You get headroom in the 4 different master channels, which makes your mix a lot better. That way I can go in and I can compress different certain sections to a degree that I think fits to what I want. So it's, I don't know how other people work, but this works for me. And I've had my studio set up like this for quite a few years now. And I was, a friend of mine basically helped me set up my studio about 10 years ago. And he said, this is the only way forward. And I must admit, it is. It's absolutely fantastic to be able to sum the masters, to be able to sum the majority of your track. It just sounds warmer, sounds better. And I also have a stereo compressor as well, which is a 3-band compressor, which is also from TubeTech, which again adds that extra punch. So the compression that I don't get in Logic, I get through my TubeTech. So voila.
How do you decide which, within Logic, what to send where? I mean, having a snare amongst synths and pianos.
Yeah, it's funny because the actual build-up of a track, every single track that I have is different. The only thing that is always a cert is that I have 4 masters, and the instruments get placed on different masters depending on what kind of compression I want for it. For example, normally I would compress the bejesus out of the snare, the hi-hat, the rhythm grooves, the percussion bits, but then I wouldn't do that with a kick drum because I want those 4 or 5 elements that create the drum pattern to be tight and punchy and bouncy, but I don't want that on the kick drum because then the rest is just going to drown out. So I would say on master 1 I would do that, on master 2 I would have the bass and the synth, for example, and all the other keyboard effects. I would compress that lightly. On master 4, I would have the vocals, which I would compress heavier again. And on master 5, which is the kick drum, and my effects, I don't compress those whatsoever. And normally that's how I do it. This setup is slightly different to compared to what I normally do. But so in answer to your question, I don't have a golden rule. It changes sometimes, and it all goes on in my head. Lots of things go on in my head that are a bit funny. This is my new single called Lose Control featuring MC Flipside, forthcoming on my new label called Get Down Recordings. It has remixes by Misha Moore and Mosaic. This is actually the original, which I've just finished after the remixes, so that's a bit of a weird one. Anyway, this, I'm just going to quickly play you this.
Taking over your system now. Let's get up right now. Time to bust out. Let's get down. It's a universal sound. Taking over your system now. Let's get up right now. Time to bust out. Let's get down. It's a universal sound. Taking over your system now. Let's get up right now. Time to bust out. Let's get down. It's a universal sound. Taking over your system now. Let's get up right now. Time to bust out. Let's get down. It's a universal sound. Taking over your system now. guaranteed to lift ya. Let me paint a picture. As the DJ boosts the mixer. Come on. Dance a night away. It's good for your soul. It's something about loud house music that makes me lose control. That makes me lose control.
So basically, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through how I actually made this in the different stages. So this is the final mix, not bounced down yet. I finished this morning just before you guys arrived. And I'm very happy with it. It's sort of tribal, jacky sort of thing. And it complements the package really well because I think the two other mixes that I've got, Musaic's mix is a lot more tribal, jacking, and Misha Moore mix is a lot more big room, slightly proggy sounding, where this one is more sort of house. So I think it works really well. So what I'll do now is I'll just explain how I got to this section here. Basically, when I start off on a track, I start off with MIDI as basically everyone does. You've got your different sounds, etc., etc. And then I work with one type of drum pattern just to get like the basic general idea going. And the reason that I start working in MIDI is just to get like the general idea of where I want to go with it. I do the automation now, but then what I then do is then I bounce basically all the stems down, all the MIDI down, all the drums, all the effects. I bounce all of those down and then I create a second project. It's a bit time consuming, I know, but it does actually work for me. So let me just find the use control, MC flip side, where is it? Okay, so this is basically what I call my bounce down version. So there is very little, if any, MIDI on this. So if we look through, yeah, it's all audio. So basically then what I do now, I change the kick drum, I treat it as a remix. For example, if we check on the Predator, the stabs that I've got on the Predator, as you can see here, it's all completely audio and it has all the automation. Because then what I can do, for example, if there is a slight delay that I really like for example, like that section there, I can then go in, for example, chop that, and then I can reverse that, and then I can use it in other parts of the backing track to create a different type of feel. So it basically gives a little, it adds a bit of extra atmosphere to the track. So it's like basically having remix parts. I'll put that on its own backing track. So it gives like a little extra underneath it, which I think basically helps a stem move. It helps it groove a bit more. I'm just going to undo all of that because I don't want to reverse that part myself. With regards to the vocals that Flipside sent over, he's in Canada and I'm in London, so it's a bit of a difference. He doesn't really pop over and jump into the studio with me. He basically recorded the vocals over there and sent me over the stems, the parts for the vocals. So what I'll do here is I'll just quickly play you the different parts that he sent over.
It's yeah.
So for example, I'll just mute these. We have the lead,
It's yeah.
which I then have on master, which I add the sample delay, which I use on all my tracks, and an echo. Not a delay, but an echo, because I don't want the delay to be too long. I just want it short enough to give it a bit of flavour. And then I have the separate files underneath, as you can see here, and they're not compressed. So basically I've only compressed the master lead vocal. I haven't compressed the other ones.
It's yeah. It's guaranteed to lift ya.
So basically, that's how I have the vocals. Then I mix them down so they sound right. But the thing is, when you have already I don't know how many, you've got 25 channels of music, audio files, MIDI, and you've got an additional 8 with vocals, and this is not a lot. Normally I have between 20 and 30 audio stems, and that's sometimes it's just too much. So what I like to do is basically bounce them all down and then create one file. Make sure you mix it so it sounds nice here, and then open up a new Logic window and add it as just one simple file. I'm not overly good at vocals. I have a very standard £100 microphone, which is that. I don't even know what brand it is, but you know what? It works. It's about. But recording vocals is a feeling. Does it sound good? It's about pronunciation of the words. It's making sure you don't have the sharp S's. The rest that I've learned is just as time goes on, you learn how to sort of mix them in. And I do listen a lot to what other people do. I play other people's music because I like all types. I like rock, hip hop, pop music. I listen to how they produce their vocals. And then I try and emulate that as best as I can. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It worked really well on this. I have auto-tune, which I've only just found out how to use. But luckily, I have actually worked with some incredibly good, talented vocalists that were just spot on. Robert Owens, Sam Obernick, Elliot Williams-Endure, who did Get Busy, people like that, who are just incredible singers. So there hasn't been much need for me to auto-tune, which is good. And also, you can auto-tune your way out of a lot, but I just think you lose the edge on a song if you do that. Overkill it anyway. You don't want it turning into some R&B pop thing from the US, which is just devoid of any type of feeling. If it's off key slightly, well, you know what, it gives it flavour and character, and I really like that. So basically, going back to what I said before, I have all the stems loaded out here, and this is version 2 of this song. Then I bounce it down, and then I will show you. Then I go into the final version, which is the one that I've just finished. And then I can show you the vocals here, which are here.
House music. There's no point trying to make another mind see it your way.
And voila, you've got a vocal that is easy to work with. You can see what you're doing. If you need to change something, if you want to chop something up, if you want to take, if he says ah, and there's a delay on that ah you really like, you can chop that up, you can move it around, you can add it to your track to give it texture. So that's how I do my vocals. In it. So basically, this whole track is audio, plain and simple. All the different elements, all the sounds. But then what I do like to do, for example, is here, if you look at the actual build-up, you can see how I've gone in and I've edited it. So for example, this section here, which I really like, this was an automation that actually happened purely by chance, this one. I now have that, so now I can actually move that around and add that to any section of the track that I want. Or for example, I can just take that one little section and make up a little groove out of that. So it's basically like, reworking your own files as a remix, part of a remix kit. So it's actually very cool to work like that. So then this is the overall general idea. I've got all the synths, I've got all the pianos, I've got all the sounds the way that I want them, and they sound tight. I'm really happy with everything, and I spend a lot of time with this. I've added the vocal from Flipside.
It's guaranteed to lift ya.
Which, if I show you the master, you can see that they are grouped on outputs 3 and 4, and they are compressed quite heavily here. This is just a very standard, very simple Logic setting, which is basically just called I don't actually know which one this is. I think this is a combination of a standard Logic setting and maybe just putting on a sample delay. I love using sample delay on vocals, basically anything, because it just gives it extra fatness, especially like on a snare. Because if you want your drum kit or you want a specific vocal to stand out and really become part of the track and really add an extra dimension to it, the sample delay put on a very short, like for example, it's like you've got delay left, you've got delay right, and as you can see there, 297 on the right, on the left one, and absolutely nothing on the right. Gives it just that little tiny amount of space needed to create something that's a bit wider. So basically this is the build up, as you can see it. So now I could go and I can manipulate all the audio as I like. I've got all the effects, everything's bounced down into audio. Then I close that and then I actually go in and then I have the final version of it, of the track, which, as you can see here, this one here is called All Stabs. Basically for me that just basically means it's all instrumentation in one. So for example, like, as I played for you before, the section that was in the build-up, this part here, I now have added that to this part. And I get a complete duplicate of the effect that I did before. So instead of having to mess around with the MIDI automation, things like that, but sometimes things just happen just out of the blue. They normally do with me, I don't really know what I'm doing. This is a good way for me to incorporate that into the rest of the track. And then I group that out and it goes on to, I don't actually know, where does that one go? Okay, so that's output 3, 4, and I compress that again. Even though I've actually already compressed it once, I compress it again with the limiter and just a standard Logic refresh and compress medium. It's really quite straightforward, quite simple. So, and then I can go in and add all the different parts. And as you can see here, as I showed you before, the vocals from Flipside before were all separated into like 8 channels. You had the lead, you had the double ups, you had the adds, you have all of those things. Whereas now, I have them just as one file, which are here somewhere.
Music. There's no point trying to make another mind see it your way.
Again, so all the parts that Flipside sent over, I've now bounced down, I've created one file, I've bounced all the effects down. For example, if you listen to, these are all the delays that I've done on version 2 of this track. Those are the sort of things you can do when working with audio. It will be difficult to go in and well, not difficult, it's pretty straightforward to do automation, but the thing is, if you've got a whole track just filled with automation, I tend to lose focus on where I'm at, because if I want to change something and I lose an automation, it's like, oh crap, I have to start all over again. Whereas if you work with audiophile, you can just basically cut. So if I just drag this one out, you can see it stops like this. There is a slight reverb towards the end of that sample, and I didn't actually want that. I just wanted it just to stop completely dead on the spot. And it's just a lot less time consuming working with audio this way. And I've added extra piano as well, which again is a bounce down of what was in the previous version. And that again is the Nexus 2, very straightforward, very simple. And then combine that with the stabs that are the complete bounce downs of everything else from version 2. You have quite an interesting sound. You can compress it so it actually sounds tight and big. But then what I have done is I've gone in, because I didn't think I needed something else, and I've actually added 2 MIDI files, which are just synths, just to give it a bit of extra flavour on top. So yeah, so this is essentially a remix of a track that I've done 2 versions of before, and that's how this pops up. And basically all my tracks sound like this. This is how I do it. So one version containing MIDI, the second version containing audio bounce downs, the third one is where I load all the bounce downs back into a new Logic file, open it all up, new drums on top, and just finish it. Because sometimes you get a bit disillusioned if you listen to the same track over and over and over again, whereas if you have the audio files, you can listen to it in a completely different way. So, works for me anyway, so yeah.